The good thing about this Montreal Canadiens week-long break is that we have a week's worth of time to discuss all the stuff going on with this team. Now, at the time of this recording, I actually don't know if Paul Byron or Galchenyuk or any of the other guys got claimed off of waivers. I'm recording this video about 6 or 7 hours before it's going to go up on YouTube, so by the time this is up, we may have a waiver wire situation that might in some capacity impact the Canadiens and their cap situation. But we might have to make another video about that if it does happen, but for right now, what we're talking about is the Montreal Canadiens. Let's talk about Tomas Tatar and Phillip Danault, because both of these guys have been making headlines the entire season, and even before the season began, because these are the two that are UFAs at the end of the season that you could debate could be seeing some pretty big pay raises, depending on who you ask. Now, they do have a few other players who are RFAs, UFAs. Victor Mete is an RFA at the end of the year, so is Arturi Lehkonen. Yoel Armia also expires as a UFA once the season ends off as well. But because Tatar and Danault have been part of what many people would say is the Habs' top line over the past calendar year and a bit, these guys are the mainstay targets. The Habs have, at the time of this recording, a $1.3 million salary cap allowance and a projected $15 million cap space next year when they will need to re-sign those guys, as well as Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Corey Perry, Lindgren, Frolik, Jordan Wheels, another big one as well. So there's a lot of conversations to have about the Montreal Canadiens and their cap. But the fact that Tomas Tatar did not suit up for the Montreal Canadiens in Saturday's win over the Toronto Maple Leafs is a big deal, because the team actually won, the team played well, and they didn't need Tatar to do it. For Phillip Danault, he's a guy who apparently rejected a beefy contract offer in the summer that would have seen him get upwards of $5 million for an AAV for 6 years. So yeah, a $30 million contract was reported to be the offer, and Phillip Danault apparently rejected it. So now we have some really interesting discussions to bring upon forward with us. Firstly, it's Tomas Tatar and whether or not the Canadiens actually need his services. Right now, if you take a look at the point production, he does have a staggering 8 points in 14 games played, which really isn't bad. That's not bad at all. 4 goals, 4 assists, 14 games. You can certainly get a lot worse than that. But the fact that the Canadiens are in a position where their top line was kind of going through the motions to the point where Claude Julien felt the need to bench Tomas Tatar last game, it kind of paints a little bit of a different picture as to whether or not the Canadiens need this kind of player long term. Tatar is 30 years old, we should probably note that as well, so any contract that he signs probably won't be for a super short amount of time. When you have guys like this, you will usually see them sign 3, 4, 5-year contracts, because these may potentially be the last contracts they ever sign at the NHL level. While 30 certainly isn't that old, once you're 33 or 34 or 35, your NHL certainty becomes a little bit less secure. So a guy like Tomas Tatar would not surprise me at all if he goes out there and tries to get a 3, 4, 5-year contract. It becomes a question of whether or not it's worth it for the Canadiens to go out there and shell out a pretty significant return for this kind of player who is just getting scratched anyway, who the team has proved they don't need to win games. While sure, the Canadiens didn't play a great 60 minutes against Toronto, they played a great 20 minutes that was good enough to take them over the edge and into the dub column. And with the emergence of other players on the Canadiens, like Cole Caulfield, like Josh Anderson, like Tyler Toffoli, who are all probably going to stick around here for a while, and who all probably are going to have a good goal-scoring touch to their game as well, it really becomes a question as to whether or not a lethal goal scorer like Tatar would be more valuable holding on to, or would you see more value in trading away this guy at the deadline, get some picks back, whatever, get some other things that can help you out, or do you just ride the wave, go into the playoffs, see if you can win a cup with Tatar, and then decide what to do in the offseason? Who knows what the plan will be there. As for Danault, though, it's a different conversation, not because Danault got scratched. He wasn't scratched, FYI. He was played the entire season so far. But for Phillip Danault, it's a really interesting conversation because he already rejected a pretty beefy contract offer. I think at $5 million a season for 6 years, you could make the argument that if Danault wants more than that, things start to become a little bit more questionable. We do know Danault is one of the most underrated two-way centers in the entire league, but he's a guy whose season high is 53 points in 81 games. This season he's at 6 points in 15 games. He hasn't scored a goal yet, and he wants more than $5 million for 6 years. Plus, with the emergence of a guy like Jake Evans, who is doing so incredibly well in the Canadiens' bottom six, the guy's an absolute workhorse out there. He's always forechecking, he's always getting in deep, he's always shutting down the play, even penalty killing. He's out there with some very good shorthanded shifts once in a while too, and a lot of people would take a look at Jake Evans and say, darn, that is the kind of guy that really helps our team out. If we have to lose a Phillip Danault if he doesn't sign back with us, we're going to be fine because we have this Jake Evans guy at 24 years old only making $750,000 until the end of 2022, doing a very good job at pretty much all the things that Phillip Danault is supposed to be good at too. So for Jake Evans, a guy who is admittedly not producing either, he's at 2 points in 15 games played, but you can't deny the impact that a Jake Evans has. It's really interesting because I've been seeing a lot of people in my comment section, in my chat specifically, saying things like, you know what, Jake Evans is making Phillip Danault's role less and less valuable on this team. Because the dollar amount, compared with the on-ice impact for Jake Evans, it supersedes that of what Phillip Danault is doing. Sure, Danault is a good shutdown guy, but when you have a Jake Evans that can do that too, things start to become a little bit more complicated. So, this is the dilemma we have. Is it appropriate to go out there and say, okay, Phillip Danault is rejecting a $5 million by 6-year contract, which would equate to $30 million overall, and he wants a little bit more? Would it be possible to just go out there and say, sorry, bud, that's a lot of money. We're not going to be able to give that to you. We have other guys we need to re-sign, like Kotkaniemi, for example, and we have a very solidified idea of how we want our team to run. The two very good offensively capable centers in Suzuki and Kotkaniemi have that shutdown guy in Evans and maybe bring in somebody else like a Ryan Poehling who still has something to prove at the NHL level. The fact is, all these guys are capable defensively, but for Phillip Danault, who's always kind of been that defensive guy, who isn't producing offensively, and who wants more money than the Canadiens are willing to give him, there certainly are some decisions to be made. And I think I'm doing a pretty okay job just highlighting the inconsistencies, I guess, because if we had a situation where Phillip Danault was looking for a contract that's similar to what he's making now, or even less valuable, I think the Canadiens would have signed it. If the Canadiens didn't have such a big crunch on their system with all the guys they had to re-sign, plus all the other contracts that you could deem are not really all too valuable dollar for dollar, like Paul Byron making 3 point something and Jordan Wheel, the contract he had earlier, maybe it would be a lot easier to say, okay, Tomas Tatar, you need a contract, here you go, whatever it is, we'll just give it to you because we know how good you can be. This is a good problem to have, I think, because you don't have good quality assets that you absolutely need to hold on to. You have other younger players that could come in and replace these guys if you really wanted them to for cheap. It's just a matter of whether or not it's worth it to shell out the extra money that you would probably use in the future to keep some of these other younger guys for some of the guys who are already good and who are already older today. Now, good is a debate. Danault, you can debate whether or not he has been good or not this season, but there is indeed an argument to be made there. So, let me know in the comments what you think about this whole idea. Is it time to start kind of writing our goodbye letters to Danault and Tatar? Whether it's a trade, free agency, whatever, let me know in the comments what you think. Obviously, I don't really expect anything to happen in the immediate short term, but by the time the offseason hits, by the time the free agency period starts, we might have ourselves a different outlook on this Habs team's veteran core than what we have today. So, let me know in the comments what you thought about all this stuff. Tatar, Danault, who goes, who stays, and for what cost. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.